Janaka Basnayake. There are some world records that are, impressive. The fastest mile, the heaviest weight lifted. And then there are the records that just make you ask, why? This is one of those. Meet 24-year-old Janaka Basnayake from Sri Lanka. In 2012, Janaka decided he wanted to break the world record for being buried alive. Yeah, you heard that right. He wanted to be voluntarily buried in a pit 10 feet deep for as long as possible. On the morning of the attempt, at around 9:30 a.m., Janaka climbed into a narrow wooden box. His family and friends helped lower him into the pit. They covered the box with wooden planks, and then they started shoveling. They piled the earth back into the hole, sealing him in complete darkness, 10 feet underground. Now, let's just think about that for a second. The weight of the earth pressing down. The sound of the dirt hitting the wood above you, getting fainter and fainter. The absolute, total blackness. It's the stuff of nightmares. Inside that box, the air would have gotten warm and stale almost immediately. The first few minutes would have been just panic. A desperate, primal need for fresh air. Janaka would have started with shallow, rapid breaths, his heart pounding in his chest. But soon, every breath would become a struggle. The oxygen level drops and the carbon dioxide level rises. That's when the real horror begins. A burning sensation in the lungs, a crushing headache. Your ears start to ring, your fingers and lips turn blue. You get confused, you start to hallucinate. In his final moments, Janaka would have been clawing at the wooden box, his nails splitting, his fingers bleeding, in a desperate, futile attempt to escape. Every gasp for air would feel like a knife in his chest. At around 4 p.m., after about 6.5 hours, his family dug him up. They pulled the box out of the ground and opened it. Janaka was unconscious. They rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead. The official cause of death wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of suffocation, carbon dioxide poisoning, and the immense pressure on his chest and lungs from the weight of the earth. Bro, he wanted a world record, but instead, he got one of the most terrifying deaths imaginable. Vladimir Ladyzhensky, Finland. A beautiful country, known for its lakes, its forests, and its saunas. They take their saunas very, very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that they used to host the World Sauna Championship. Yes, I'm serious. The rules were simple. A group of people sit in a sauna heated to 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Every 30 seconds, half a liter of water is poured onto the stove. The last person to walk out on their own 2 feet is the winner. In 2010, the final came down to 2 men. The reigning 5-time champion, a Finn named Timo Kaukonen, and a Russian amateur wrestler, 60-year-old Vladimir Ladyzhensky. Both men were experienced. They knew what they were doing. Or so they thought. For 6 minutes, they sat in that scorching heat as steam and scalding water filled the air. The temperature just kept rising. Outside, spectators watched through the glass door. They could see the 2 men, sweating profusely, their skin turning a deep, angry red. And then, something went wrong. Both men started to convulse. The judges realized this wasn't part of the competition. They rushed to the door and dragged the 2 men out. What they saw was horrific. Their skin was covered in massive, weeping blisters. In some places, it was literally sloughing off their bodies. The inside of the sauna was spattered with blood and fluid. Vladimir was dead. Timo Kaukonen was in critical condition, but he survived, though with severe burns and kidney failure. The autopsy on Vladimir revealed he had died from 3rd-degree burns, but it also revealed something else. He had used strong painkillers and a numbing anesthetic ointment all over his body before the final. He couldn't feel the damage being done. He couldn't feel his own body cooking. His skin was literally melting, His internal organs were failing from the extreme heat, but the painkillers masked the agony. He sat there, stoically, while his body was destroyed from the inside out. The competition was immediately canceled and has never been held again. And for good reason. Guy Garman. Some people are just built different. They see a mountain, they have to climb it. They see a record, they have to break it. And then there's Guy Garman, a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor from the U.S. Virgin Islands. But his patients knew him by another name, Doc Deep, and he took that name seriously. In just a few years, he went from a casual scuba diver to an extreme technical diver, obsessed with going deeper than anyone else. In August 2015, he set his sights on the ultimate prize, a world record dive to 1,200 feet. For context, that's like diving the full height of the Empire State Building, underwater, in total darkness. Now, the previous record holder was a highly experienced professional diver. Guy was not. He had fewer than 600 total dives, and only about 35 of those were below 500 feet. He was, by all accounts, rushing. He was warned by other divers that he was moving too fast, that he was skipping crucial steps in his training. But he wouldn't listen.
Nope.
On August 15th, he began his descent. The plan was to meet a series of support divers at different depths on his way back up. But he never made it to the first rendezvous. He just disappeared into the abyss. His body was recovered 3 days later. So what happened down there, in the crushing dark? It's a cocktail of horrors. At that depth, you can get something called high-pressure neurological syndrome, or HPNS. Your hands start to tremble uncontrollably. You get muscle spasms, tunnel vision, and a crippling cognitive fog. You can't think straight. You can't even trust your own hands to work the equipment. Then there's the pain. A deep, grinding pain in your joints, especially your knees and shoulders, as the immense pressure literally compresses your cartilage. It feels like your bones are being crushed in a vice. And all the while, the nitrogen in the air you're breathing becomes a powerful narcotic. You feel drunk, disoriented, making fatal mistakes without even realizing it. The official cause of death was drowning. But he didn't just drown. He was lost in a neurological storm, crippled by pain, and hopelessly intoxicated by the very air he was breathing. He was an amateur who tried to conquer the deep, and the deep, it doesn't suffer fools. Sailendra Nath Roy. And now for something completely different. Meet Sailendra Nath Roy, a 49-year-old police driver from India. Sailendra wasn't a diver or a mountaineer. His claim to fame was his hair. No, seriously. He was a Guinness World Record holder for traveling the farthest on a zip line, attached only by his long, luscious ponytail. In 2013, he decided to break his own record. The stage was set at the Coronation Bridge in West Bengal over the Teesta River. A 600-foot steel cable was stretched across the river, about 65 feet above the water. A crowd of hundreds gathered to watch. Sailendra attached his ponytail to a pulley on the cable, and with a cheer from the crowd, he was off. For a while, everything went perfectly. He was gliding across the river, his body dangling beneath him, suspended only by his hair. And then, about halfway across, he just stopped. His hair had gotten tangled in the pulley mechanism. He was stuck, dangling helplessly, 65 feet above the river. At first, the crowd cheered, thinking it was part of the show. But then, the minutes started to tick by. Sailendra was trying to free himself, shouting for help, his arms flailing. You could see the panic set in. Imagine the pain. The entire weight of your body pulling on your scalp. A searing, burning pain, like 1,000 needles being driven into your skull. His arms would have gotten tired, his muscles screaming in protest. He hung there for about 45 minutes, struggling, while the crowd below watched in horrified silence. Eventually, he went limp. Rescuers finally managed to get him down, but it was too late. He had suffered a massive heart attack. The extreme stress and pain had literally broken his heart. His wife had begged him not to do it. She told him it was too dangerous, that this should be his last stunt. He promised her it would be. He was right. Diana Paris. Skydivers are a different breed. They call themselves swoopers and canopy pilots. They talk about boogies and tracking. It's a whole subculture built around the thrill of falling. But sometimes, that thrill comes at a terrible price. Meet Diana Paris, a 46-year-old skydiver from Berlin, Germany. In April 2014, she was in Arizona, taking part in a massive event. 222 skydivers were attempting to set a new world record for the largest freefall formation. Imagine that. 222 people jumping out of multiple planes at 18,000 feet, trying to link up in a giant, intricate pattern, all while hurtling towards the Earth at over 120 miles per hour. For about 70 seconds, it's a beautifully choreographed chaos. And then, it's time to break away and pull the ripcord. For 221 of those jumpers, it went exactly as planned. But for Diana, it didn't. Her main parachute malfunctioned. We don't know exactly what went wrong. Maybe it was a line twist. Maybe the slider didn't come down properly. But the result was the same. A tangled, useless piece of nylon instead of a life-saving canopy. Every skydiver's worst nightmare. She did what she was trained to do. She cut away the main parachute and pulled the handle for her reserve. But she was already too low. The reserve parachute needs time and altitude to open fully. Diana didn't have either. Eyewitnesses on the ground saw a flash of white as the reserve started to deploy, but it was too late. It was just a streamer, a half-inflated canopy that did nothing to slow her down. She hit the ground at terminal velocity. The impact was instantaneous. Paramedics were on the scene in moments, but there was nothing they could do. She was pronounced dead at the scene. One tiny fatal error, a few seconds of bad luck, and a day that started with the promise of a world record ended in tragedy. Jeremy Morris and Jeff Fink. The early 2010s, the era of obstacle course racing, the Tough Mudder, the Spartan Race, and the Warrior Dash. These events were everywhere. Thousands of people paying good money to run through mud, climb over walls, and crawl under barbed wire. It was all about pushing your limits, right? Well, in July 2011, near Kansas City, those limits were pushed way too far. It was the weekend of the Warrior Dash. 15,000 people had signed up. But there was a problem. A big one. A brutal, record-breaking heat wave had settled over the area. The heat index was soaring to 111 degrees Fahrenheit. The organizers, Red Frog Events, decided to go ahead with the race anyway. What could possibly go wrong? Meet 28-year-old Jeremy Morris, a fit, experienced runner and diver. He was out on the course, pushing through the mud and the heat when he collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital. His core body temperature was 111 degrees Fahrenheit. Let that sink in. Normal is 98.6. At 104, you're in serious trouble. At 111, your body is literally cooking itself from the inside out. His organs started to shut down. His brain swelled. His circulatory system collapsed. He died a few days later from complications of severe heat stroke. And he wasn't the only one. Another participant, 53-year-old Jeff Fink, also collapsed during the race and died a few days later from the same cause. The families were furious. They argued that the race should have been canceled, that there wasn't enough water or medical support for a race in such extreme conditions. It's a classic case of corporate greed over common sense. The drive to make a profit, even when it puts people's lives at risk. Jeremy and Jeff weren't elite athletes who died pushing the boundaries of human performance. They were just regular guys who signed up for a fun weekend challenge and paid the ultimate price for someone else's bad decision. Colombian gravity bikers. There are extreme sports, and then there's just a death wish. This next one falls squarely in the second category. It's called gravity biking, and it's popular in the mountainous regions of Colombia. The bikes are, Frankenstein creations. Stripped down frames, no brakes, no gears. The riders lie flat on their stomachs, head first, to be as aerodynamic as possible. And then they just let go. They fly down steep, winding mountain roads at insane speeds, often weaving in and out of traffic. On March 16, 2024, on a dangerous stretch of road between Popayan and El Tambo, a group of 4 young people were doing just that. They were filming themselves, laughing, shouting, pushing their luck. One of them, a young woman named Tatiana, was on her first run. They came into a sharp corner, going way too fast. One of the riders lost control. He veered into the oncoming lane and slammed head-on into a dump truck. The impact was catastrophic. He and another rider, Duber, were killed instantly. Tatiana and the 4th rider were critically injured. The scene was chaos. The truck driver was in shock. The local community was furious, not at the kids, but at the truck driver. They surrounded his truck, threatening him with knives. The police had to escort him away for his own safety. It's a twisted, tragic situation. The kids made a reckless choice, but the anger of the community was directed at the man who was just driving to work. And the most heartbreaking part? One of the survivors had been caught by the police doing the exact same thing before. They had confiscated his bike, but he just got another one. It's an addiction to adrenaline, a feeling of invincibility that so many young people have. A feeling that, for 2 of them, ended in a bloody wreck on a Colombian mountain road.